Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you for tuning in. My name's Aaron Dunn. I'm a composer for media and film, and also I'm an avid Tolkien fan. And so today I would like to talk about something I've been looking forward to talking about for a while, which is how Tolkien writes female characters. And this has been brought up, and I'm going to talk about it vis-a-vis Rings of Power. If you haven't seen the videos that I've done there, go back on the channel, look through the playlist. I think there's six reviews, episode reviews, talking about Rings of Power. I'm going to try and talk about Rings of Power as little as possible in this, because I think what I'm trying to aim at here is something which is an older debate than whether you think Rings of Power is good or not, or whether you think the writing is good or not, although that's going to come up. So what I want to talk about is how Tolkien writes female characters in his Legendarium, and I really only have two examples I want to focus on for today. I can talk about others, but I really don't have that much time. I'm getting to a busy season for me in what I do, so I don't have a ton of time to read through every little jot and tittle of Tolkien right now. I wish I did. Anyhow, so this is a reaction for me to something I've seen out. This is in social media. I haven't really talked about this with people in person, but I have seen it, and I don't know if it was Tolkien Society Facebook page or something like that years ago or whatever, but I've seen bits of this come out there, and it's related to some of the chatter with Rings of Power, which is Tolkien really doesn't write women all that well in Lord of the Rings or just in general. It's just, you know, he's a man from the 1930s and you're going to get what you're going to get, is the most glib way of putting it. I don't really agree with that. Although I can freely grant you in Lord of the Rings that there aren't that many female heroic characters. So in that sense, these critics, and these are Tolkien fans making this criticism. These are not ignoramus folks making this criticism, although I think it deserves further nuance. So I have here one of my favorite books, Beren and Luthien from Tolkien, and below it, yes, these are the hardcovers, The Fall of Gondolin. And so if you're familiar with the Legendarium at all, you know where I'm going with this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Luthien and a little bit, maybe this isn't as popular a take, but I'm going to talk about Idril a little bit from The Fall of Gondolin. And I'm going to start with Idril. So, and I'll start with some of the argument that I've seen about Tolkien writing female characters and how prominent they are and what their substance is, and you know, if they're sort of just mentioned by name or whatever. There are a absolute load of names mentioned in Tolkien, as you know. And if you thought Lord of the Rings was intense, well, try the Silmarillion. The best thing I have as an analogy for this would be you can read the Annals of the Elves, and it is somewhat akin to reading the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles in the Bible. Which means there's a lot of names. So we have many mentions of certain characters that have not as much, you know, that they're just named and then Tolkien moves on. You can talk about Fëanor's mom. You can talk about Fëanor's wife. All of these folks where they get a couple lines and that's about it. So if you don't like that, I understand. And personally, I'd like to spend a little bit more in the Silmarillion of time spending on Fëanor's relationship with Danielle the Wise, his wife, who he stopped listening to and then made a big problem out of things. I don't want to make this a huge feminist or male versus female thing. That's not the point of this video at all. And I'm not trying to argue for misogyny or anything like that either, just to get that out of the way. But I digress. I think my favorite female character in the Silmarillion is probably Idril, and if not, it's Luthien. And there are others of note, but I'm going to focus on these two. And you're welcome to Google this information and check out, I think it's Tolkien Gateway or something like that. Just look up Idril in Tolkien Gateway and tell me if she's not a great character. And she doesn't have as much personality in the Silmarillion as in the History of Middle-earth stuff when you get some more of the apocryphal information, but the gist is there. And the crux of my argument is basically this. Idril is incredibly smart. She is farsighted, highly intuitive, and for elven royalty that could be, you know, elves are supposed to be really wise, right? But she's like special with this. Like we see in the Jackson trilogy how Elrond and Galadriel will have these conversations basically telepathically. And whether they're really making that argument or not, I think in the movies they are. In the book, is that really what they're doing? I don't know. So we're talking that level of stuff and then some. So Idril had this level of foresight in terms of what was going to happen to the city that she lived in. And she had the guile and cleverness to actually implement a solution for it. So here's a little bit Fall of Gondolin information here. In the book, there's the book The Fall of Gondolin. There's the Silmarillion. If you need a short version, read the Silmarillion. If you want the long version with crazy amounts of detail, check out the Book of Lost Tales 2, The Fall of Gondolin. Or you can just buy the book, The Fall of Gondolin, which came out, I want to say 5 years ago, which goes over all the notes of Christopher Tolkien and stuff like that, and all the different versions of the story that are there. There's also the unfinished tales, but you don't get as much Idril information there. So in the Fall of Gondolin, there's this prophecy that the city's eventually, you're going to get cooked. And this comes from the Lord of Waters, Ulmo. And he tells Turgon this. And Turgon doesn't necessarily listen all that much. And at a certain point, Idril figures out, okay, I've got this foreboding feeling about my cousin that's actually into her romantically, which is not something the elves do. They don't do that kind of thing. I think I mentioned that in one of the other Rings videos talking about Idril. But she gets this feeling about him that his name's Meglin, or Meglin is what they use in Book of Lost Tales, that he is going to somehow screw things up and they're going to end up in trouble. And she actually has like these prophetic dreams about what's going to happen to the city. She has this premonitory dream that Meglin was, the city's on fire and Meglin's going to throw her son, Arendil, over the walls into the flames. And so going along with that, she decides, okay, well, we're going to find a way out of the city. And if you get the idea for Gondolin, if you're not familiar with Gondolin, again, look it up. And sort of what I have in my head about it is it's sort of Minas Tirith-ish from the Third Age. It's a city, in some mountains. It's not necessarily carved out of a mountain, but it sort of is. And it's completely hidden, and it's actually hidden within this veil of rock. And, excuse me, so within this veil, it's all mountains, right? And it's not really easy to find. So they also have a way that elves or friendlies might find their way out of the rest of Beleriand, because we're in the First Age, to find their way out of the domain of Morgoth, who is their enemy, Sauron's boss. We'll get to Sauron and Luthien later. But in Gondolin, they had a way where there's this tunnel and this secret way where people could find a way that you're escaping Beleriand to get to Gondolin. And it's not known to a lot, and it's well guarded. And the eagles, yes, those eagles, guard it from their pass above Gondolin. So they actually help keep Gondolin safe. Turgon had a really good deal with the Eagles. Because they would go and they would find Morgoth's spies, which I believe in the Book of Lost Tales, it's described as like rats and rodents and snakes and stuff like that, just crawling through the rocks trying to serve Morgoth. There is a link in the apocryphal material, which I call Book of Lost Tales, Morgoth's Ring, I believe, where even Morgoth had found a way to have a control of nature. And that's why when Morgoth is actually defeated at the end of the First Age, that there's a lot of upheaval. The whole of Middle-earth was Morgoth's ring, is the quote, or roughly speaking. So the Eagles are helping out keeping this all quiet. So that's the way of escape. That's one way in and out of Gondolin. So Idril decides that they're going to need a way out. And secondly, that this has to be secret. Now, here's the trick. When you're royalty in Tolkien and just about any other story, you're accorded a certain level of confidentiality within the king's council, so you know what's going on. So you've got the 12 houses of Gondolin and their leaders, and that's sort of how I'm putting together Gondolin's society. And then you've got like the king, House of the King, all his advisors, and you've got his family, which is not very many. You've basically got Turgon, Meglin, Idril, and Tur. And then the rest of the advisors, all the houses of Gondolin. And if you read the Book of Lost Tales, you will find how they all discuss things, because they do decide how to defend the city in there. And they go through it. And strategy and whatever else. So within that, to keep a secret from your cousin, who is the king's trusted advisor, because that's true, and somehow, of course, the king trusts Tur as well, which is son-in-law, but, you know, he goes with the cousin first, because Meglin figures out, just like in many of the tragic tales, it's like there's always an advisor in there that's going to tell the king exactly what he wants to hear. And of course, it leads to disaster, which this one does. So Idril has to keep her idea incredibly quiet. So Tur tells her, it's like, you only use people that you absolutely, would trust with your life, kind of a thing. And so these special elves find a way to keep this secret, and two, dig another way out of Gondolin. Because they're encircled by mountains. It's called the Encircling Mountains. It's where they live. That's where Gondolin is. I may link a map in this video just to keep this straight. So Idril finds a way to keep that quiet. And so when the city starts falling and they need to evacuate, they actually have a way out. But that's not only how... this is a really great character for Tolkien, for anybody honestly to write. And so she also, when Gondolin starts to have to defend itself, she fights. She fights for her home. She suits up, ready to go. So does her son, Erendil, by the way. That's Elrond's dad. Erendil's only 7 years old at this point, by the way. Anyhow, so she's happy to fight, and she'll fight for her family and for her home and stuff like that. Is there that much depth going on here? Not entirely, but you're talking about an elf in the First Age fighting, an elf maid fighting, and fighting not only with great intelligence, intuition, in terms of preparing and finding a way to navigate really difficult social situations, and using powers of perception and stuff like that. She figured out that Meglin had a thing for her a long time ago and despised him for it in the story, and found a way to be like, ew, that's gross. I don't trust you. Good move. And again, it's all in the Silmarillion, how she perceives this stuff, the vibe that he's giving off. And so she not only takes action, she manages to keep it a secret. they do eventually escape from the city because of her. And that's a large part of her story. But she does a lot of interesting stuff, and she's a strong character. And so that's how that goes. And that's that part. So we'll move on to that. Okay, so and this is and forgive the rambling a little bit, but with a character like this, when I hear that Tolkien didn't write women very well, I have to put my hand up and say, pause for 1 second. Is Idril not a great character? Full stop, whether she married Tuor or not, whether she gave birth to Erendil who saves everybody or not. Is she a good character in her own right? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Next question. Did Tolkien write her? Yes. Both J.R.R. and Christopher Tolkien wrote this character. And I would say Christopher edited together to make it more cohesive. And also gave us all the different little permutations of how the character morphs and moves around and changes over time, and how Tolkien thought about this. This is not an entirely one-dimensional character, but it's definitely not. Well, she's got some layers, right? So there's that, and this is also a girl that in the I believe this is on the Tolkien Gateway page, and I haven't seen this in the text, and I'm gonna have to go find it because I want to read it. Is that this is a girl that lost her mother in the grinding ice. The Helcarax, when the Noldor eventually, the ones that got screwed at the burning of the ships, Fëanor took the ships, and then Fingolfin and Galadriel and all their people, they had to go the long way around, which was over this ice. So picture maybe Siberia or I don't know, the North Pole, cold, very, very cold, and icy, and lots of elves died during that, and that's apparently where Turgon's wife was lost, among others, I'm sure. So you've got a character that's faced extraordinary adversity up to, forget about the fall of Gondolin, almost losing her son, because Erendil almost does get thrown away, but for Turgon showing up and snapping Maeglin in half and throwing him over the walls, which is I have to say, the way they wrote that, I love how Tolkien did that. I do. Hard to touch. But, so, anyway, going back to what the point that I'm trying to make is that when I hear Tolkien doesn't write women well, and then I see how, and this is no disrespect to Morfydd Clark, how they wrote Galadriel in Rings of Power, I have to say, I don't know how you could say that when you did something so poor by comparison, because Idril is a far more interesting character than the way Galadriel was portrayed in Rings of Power. And I'm discounting the acting. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the way she was written. And that's a more established character. Like, Galadriel is far more pop culture than Idril, and I don't think anybody would debate that. So that's sort of the point I make. It's like, if you're going to try and rewrite a female character for Tolkien, you have to know what you're doing. And, like, honestly, I kind of, like, I'm thinking about this today. I've been thinking about this video for a long time. Is that when you have someone like Idril, but you can't use them for this particular thing, I'm wondering, why didn't you just read a little bit of that, take some of her elements and plug that into Galadriel for this? If you're going to have to do it your own way anyway, like, do it good. Because this we'll do it our own way thing, they literally did their own thing, and I don't think it worked. So it needs a reworking. But anyway, so they didn't, I can't say they bested Idril in Rings of Power at all. Not even close. Because I actually find Idril is not, well, she's not super, like, she's not written that heavily, but she's not nearly as unlikable as they did with Galadriel and Rings of Power, or just kind of mean-spirited and nasty. Like, there's none of that. And, like, this is a girl that's had to deal with her cousin's incestuous infatuation with her for years. And she's not, like, doesn't seem bitter or vindictive. She just doesn't trust the dude, and it's like, all right, you're going to mess something up big time here. I don't trust you. We're moving along. And so that's one point. Okay, the next one is Luthien. I cannot think of a she's different to Idril for me. And it hits different because she does not fight with a sword. And it reminds me of something that Liv Tyler actually said, apparently on the set of Lord of the Rings, or just talking about the character. They wanted to write her in Helm's Deep. This is easily findable. They wanted to write her in Helm's Deep in the Two Towers, in the Jackson trilogy. And I don't know who said it. I think it was Liv that said it, was like, look, to be strong, she doesn't need to have a sword. And that is Luthien. Now, there are many little bits that are... I'll pull the book up again. Once again. There it is. By the way, she's riding a giant dog, which is fantastic because I got a giant dog for this reason. No, I don't ride my dog like a horse. But I did name him Huan because of this book. I absolutely adore this story. And if there's not a way that would prove that Tolkien actually had a pretty high view of women, it's the way he writes Luthien. Most beautiful thing that Beron's ever seen. He's Beron, by the way. Tolkien and his wife Edith. That's Beron and Luthien. It's on the tombstones, as everybody knows. So this guy thought very highly of his wife, and I'm not even going to go in that direction with this. I just want to deal with the character. Luthien has serious magic chops, and what's hilarious about this for me, vis-a-vis the Rings of Power, is that Galadriel would have known Luthien, because Galadriel spent time in Doriath, learning from Luthien's mother, Melian, the Maya. Same species of being as Sauron, Gandalf, and Eowyn, all the wizards. You get the idea. In fact, the Balrogs are technically Maiar as well. And that's what Sauron, Melian, all of them. So Melian had a certain, she's a magical being, like sort of quasi-godlike, I would say, but assumed the form of, I think, a female elf because she wanted to be with Thingol, who was an elf. And they somehow, and again, the metaphysics of this elude me, that doesn't mean they're not in the books. But her and Thingol have this child called Luthien, most beautiful of all the children of the Eldar. And Luthien, in her story, is, again, wonderful opportunities to build characters around and sort of bits that you can work with here. Just as a fan of fantasy, frankly, like I absolutely love this, is that Luthien is not just a sheltered little girl. Like she's probably... Oh, man, when she meets Beron, I'm not sure how old she is. She's at least 500 or so, I gotta think. Might be even younger than that. The age difference isn't that crazy, but when she meets Beron, their love is strictly forbidden. In fact, Thingol basically tells Beron, look, sure, you can marry her, but you're going to have to get a Silmaril from Morgoth. And everybody knows that really means he's telling Beron to go to hell, which is actually what Angband is. It is technically the Hells of Iron. That's what it's called. But that Thingol's being like, yeah, oh, all right, so we're gonna get rid of this sucker. We'll see if this infatuation lasts. So you can go to hell and find out if you can get back from hell with something, you can marry her, sure. And so off Beren goes. Beren, who had already, run from Sauron for a while. This is, again, more First Age history, right? He had run from Sauron. He had escaped wolves. He had killed a bunch of orcs. He'd done a bunch of stuff already. Roamed the wild. Gone through the what was it? I can't actually pronounce it. The bit where all of Ungoliant's spawn hung out in Middle Earth. He managed to, if you think of Mirkwood from the Hobbit films, more magical and disgusting than that, and really weird creatures and stuff like that. And he managed to survive that and scrape his way into Doriath, and then he found Luthien. But Luthien being far, again, kind of she's very fairy-like in terms of the way she sort of presents, and then she's got these amazing human qualities, which is so Thingol sends Beren away, and she loves him, wants to make sure he doesn't get killed, but she's basically in certain points of the story, she's locked up, can't get out, locked up in a treehouse somewhere in Doriath, and gets a feeling, and Huon, the wonderful dog, somehow they have him, and the dog talks, by the way, which is fantastic. Gives her advice, is like, hey, if you want to do this, you can, we can go find Beren, basically. I can't count the number of times that Luthien saves Beren in this story. It's at least 3. And there's 3 I can think of. One is when he's wounded on the way back from being trapped in Sauron's dungeon. So actually she saves him before that. She also tends to him after he, after he's wounded by Celegorm and Curufin, who they had Huon. Celegorm actually had Huon at the outset of this. Huon was a gift from the Valar Arome. And so what happens there is, this stuff is wild, right? I just love the amount of detail that Tolkien goes into, but Luthien saves Beren the first time by having an intuition. I love these intuitive characters in Tolkien, by the way, and the kind of intuition that both Idril and Luthien have is really, I find it quite interesting. But she gets this foreboding feeling, and she's like, all right, I'm escaping from the treehouse now, and I'm going to go find this guy. And she you heard a rumor, it's like he's here, and he had been taken captive. And, of course, Sauron is in charge, right? So off Luthien goes with Huon, escapes. She grows her hair out magically to get out of the treehouse, jumps on the dog, and they ride over. And this is where Huon and Luthien take down Sauron. Kid you not. It's in the books. Look it up, whatever amount of detail you want. Tolkien's got it for you. And so after she does that, she manages to, of course, get Beren out of the pits. Of course, here's the time with Rings of Power. We roll our eyes a little bit. This is where Galadriel's brother dies, is in, Tolkien Garoth, which is the Isle of Werewolves, in a castle that he himself originally built, and then Sauron took over in the Dagor Bragollach. There's so much detail in this stuff, you have to forgive the recall's a little short. But Finrod dies there, saving Beren. And then Luthien finishes the job and finds him. After she and Sauron and Huon have their spat. She deals with it. So does Huon. And she's able to cast him back to the Master and basically destroy his form, essentially, and sends his spirit quaking back to Morgoth, is the words that she uses. is pretty memorable, I have to say. And also, the dog would not let go. Like, Huon locks on Sauron, and Sauron can't go. And Sauron thought he was going to manage to take this dog. No. Nope. Didn't happen. Didn't work. And he shapeshifted from, dog to snake to vampire, and he was just bleeding everywhere. So he got smoked twice and humiliated. And so she pulls Beren out of there, and then they thought to go back to Doriath and rest for a while, and then Beren's like, they were going to just run away together, and Beren's like, nah, I got to finish this thing. And so off they go, and Beren leaves, goes back, and then Luthien's like, no, I'm not doing this. Huon, we're going for a ride again. And so off they go. They go to finish the quest. And I'm very much abbreviating the story. It is very much worth reading. So you should definitely do that. And so they go, and they have to go deal with getting a Silmaril out of the first Dark Lord's fortress. And of course, they are greeted at the gate. And actually, Huon is not with them at this point. He sort of parts ways for a little bit, I believe, and no, he is with them. But Luthien manages to put to sleep this giant wolf called Carcharoth. And this is a creation of Morgoth, to be the greatest wolf ever, the greatest werewolf ever, and because he knew about Huon's prophecy that Huon would only die in battle with this wolf. So Morgoth raised it himself. And both Morgoth and Sauron had tried different things about this wolf, and Sauron failed miserably, and Morgoth eventually succeeds, but that's not till the end of the story. But Luthien puts Carcharoth to sleep with a song and a spell, and then they go in. And somehow Beren gets in disguised somehow as a dog, and creeps under Morgoth's throne as a dog or a werewolf, and then Luthien is left there dealing with Morgoth. And Morgoth knows exactly who she is, right? And she, I think this is due to the genius and her intuition again, but figures out how to play for time a little bit. And so Morgoth is kind of, I don't want to say seduced, but they talk about in the book, it's like this dark lust that he's having, and I don't know how sexual that is. I'm not even going to take it there. I'm not even going to prognosticate on that. But he had some thoughts similar to, Sauron and Galadriel, in place of a Dark Lord, you'll have a queen kind of a thing, or they'll rule together or something. So similar trope with Morgoth, knowing that this is a semi-godlike character as well, that Luthien is. And Luthien dances, and then Morgoth goes to sleep. Again, this is a different way of fighting. This is very much, there's a lot of magic going on, and she's got a lot going. This girl's got a lot going for her. She's very intelligent. She gives wise advice. All the rest of it, and she is able to perceive what's going on around her very clearly, including the fact that her father really just wants Beren to die. Because elves and men don't necessarily all get along, and Thingol is probably the snootiest of the lot. He shouldn't be, because he married a Maya. You should understand that he married way above his station, have a little bit of empathy, but he's an arrogant prat by this point. By the end of the story, he's sorted it out, because his smart, very wise wife says to him, "You've either doomed your daughter or yourself, dummy." Anyway, back to Luthien. They get the Silmaril, right? Like, they manage to do it, and then they have to flee. And long story short, they do manage to get back to Doriath with the Silmaril-ish, because Karkaroth wakes up in the intervening time and bites Baron's hand off that has the Silmaril, and they have to get out of there, and Luthien manages to actually fix his wound by sucking the poison from Karkaroth's bite out of Baron's arm, and keeps him just barely alive. And they managed to barely get back, and eventually they show up, and Baron shows Thingol his bloody stump of a hand. It's a little bit healed by then, of course, but of course Karkaroth, with the Silmaril inside of him, being an evil creature, it's burning his insides up the entire time. So he's going crazy all throughout the north of Middle-earth, like absolutely destroying everything in his path. Nobody can stop him. Everybody's like, what is going on? Anyway, we're getting far afield. Eventually, Thingol and all the captains of Doriath figure out, all right, well, we want the Silmaril still. And, Karkaroth's here again. Great. His rampage took him this far south. Look at it on a map. It's quite a distance that this guy covered in not a lot of time. So they go out, and Karkaroth gets a good chunk of Baron and actually kills him. And so they end up going, it gets wild. And when you read it in the Silmarillion, it's like he passes away, and Luthien somehow goes over to talk to Mandos, who is the guy that he's basically the guy that mans the halls of the dead. And she sings this song of such beauty that even he is moved to almost to tears. And basically grants Baron life again. Somehow he negotiates this. And I'm kind of butchering it a little bit, but bear with me. So Baron and Luthien actually get a chance to live at her behest. Again, this is her intercession that Baron comes back from the dead. And it's a beautiful song. Got to have a good song thrown in there. Again, this is not entirely how you'd think a great character would be written, but this is a crazy good character. like both Idril and Luthien are sneaky good when they have to be, and their intelligence and foresight, particularly in Idril's case, but also in Luthien's, feeling that intuitive thing in your gut that, okay, something bad is going to happen to somebody or someone I care about or something, and I'm going to go and do it. And you can contrast that with a character like Denethor in The Lord of the Rings, and I'm going to paint it with however Gandalf talks about it in Return of the King, the movie, which is, they talk about, long has Lord Denethor foreseen this doom, and Gandalf says, foreseen and done nothing. If you contrast that with Luthien and Idril, it gets pretty rich. Because the ladies come out winning severely on both sides. And this is not an aberration. There's a lot of inaction with some of the guys in Middle-earth. And there's a lot of rash action. And these ladies are pretty calculated, right? And they're smart. They're really smart. So my admiration for both characters, I don't think, could be larger. And so I'll wrap it up sort of like this. I think it's cool to try and bring old characters new life. And to do adaptations which are, high production value and putting a modern spin on an older character. I understand that. I write music. I write music for Tolkien. I've written stuff about Idril. I've written stuff about Luthien. That stuff will all be attached below this video. You'll get some links. But click on those if you want to support what I'm doing. But with these characters, there is a treasure trove of great material that if one wants to present a little bit more femininity in Tolkien, it's there. It's there already, is my contention. And to drag this out, or to draw this out, I think it's worth doing. It doesn't look the way they presented Galadriel. I couldn't get behind it. The way they presented Cate Blanchett Galadriel was much different, even in the Hobbit movies, to what we got in Rings of Power, and everybody can see that. I would contend that wasn't the best of decisions, because the Galadriel from the Lord of the Rings trilogies and the Hobbit trilogy is closer for me to what Tolkien was thinking about Luthien or Galadriel or Idril. It's more like there's sort of like a lane that they're all in, and I think there's a more respectful way to deal with it. Whereas we got this modern adaptation, which is different and is all right. We want to be ladies forward. I'm cool with that, but I just don't think it was handled very well. And I would hope that going forward we'll be looking at things that are more in concert with Tolkien, because these women are strong. I don't think Luthien ever wields a sword, but you can't convince me that that's not a strong woman. You can't. And she just does it in a different way. It just doesn't involve violence. I think that's pretty cool. And Idril is a more, I would say, in terms of all the tools are there, except Idril doesn't really do magic. It's more foresight, and she doesn't mind fighting and picking up a sword and throwing on some armor if she has to. Luthien is almost entirely magic and intuition, and both are fascinating. So that'll be it from me. I do appreciate you sticking with me if you stuck through to the end of this video, and I thank you for doing so. I hope that you'll check out the links down below. Hit the subscribe button and the like button if you enjoyed this, and we'll get some more content out in the near future. And again, my name's Aaron Dunn, and I'm a composer, film, media, what have you, and also a Tolkien fan, so I really care about this stuff. And so I hope that you check out some of my work at SILMARILLIONsymphony.bandcamp.com, and also I've got my Spotify links down below, and you can check that out. And I hope to talk to all of you again soon. Thank you very much.